What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Play It Out podcast, a competitive-focused Age of Sigmar podcast. My name is Kyle, aka Creator Gator, and I'm here on a solo mission this week because, unfortunately, James and I do happen to pretend to be adults every now and then, which means our schedules don't necessarily interline, and Games Workshop keeps throwing us articles, so we have multiple articles that we want to talk about, and we want to find time to talk about. So this is one of those segments that I'm going to be talking mostly about Stormcast Eternals. So James said it's okay if I kind of go on my own and just talk to you guys about Stormcast Eternals a bit. We're also going to talk about battle formations and how that's going to affect the game going forward into 4th edition. But yeah, we have a lot of Stormcast news to talk about. And as the resident Stormcast player, I feel excited to talk about them. So they showed us some new models, particularly the Reclusians, who are the first unit, I believe, that they've named from the Ruination Chamber, which has me excited. The models look pretty cool. It looks like they're a unit of 3 with 2 little mortal companions, which we'll talk about later. That's pretty exciting. I love Blade Guard veterans. They're like one of my favorite units in 40k, especially Space Marines. So I'm excited that we get to play more with that type of unit in Age of Sigmar. So I'm definitely getting the launch box, obviously. So I'm super excited to get my hands on those guys and start building and painting them. They are a little bit detail heavy, and I'm not the best painter in the world. So it will slow me down when it comes to painting, but I'm learning. You know what I mean? I'm getting better at it. So I hope that I can paint those guys relatively efficiently and get them on the table. So who are they? So the Ruination Chamber is basically what happens when a Stormcast Eternal has been reforged too many times. They go to the nursing home, which is the Ruination Chamber. So when they go there, what they're basically doing is they are meditating, praying, and kind of like just stretching for the entire time that they're there, while waiting for Ionis Cryptborn and other Stormcast Eternals to figure out what's going on with this reforging issue, where they keep losing more and more of their humanity and soul as they get continuously reforged. So they're hanging out there, basically just chilling in the Stormcast Eternal nursing home. And when the rats showed up with a giant blight city, Sigmar decided that was like an Avengers level threat and said, all right, you guys, we're pulling you guys out of retirement. You guys are going back into the fray. So he's pulling these guys out and he's putting them back on the battlefield. Now, importantly, they're armed with axes, not hammers. So a little tidbit of lore is Stormcast Eternals typically fight with hammers because it's kind of a signifier that they're not only here to fight, they're here to build back what once was. So they want to go into the mortal realms, clear it out of like dangerous things, and then build back civilization. You know what I mean? So that's what you kind of do with hammers. They're used as a weapon, but they're also there to, build. These guys don't have hammers. They're not here to build. They're here to kill. So they have axes. You know what I mean? Which is pretty cool that they keep going with that theme. Now the super interesting part is their little companions. So they have, looks like 2 little dudes called Memorians, who are immortal priests who are often descendants of the Stormcast that they're following, and they anchor the presence, which retains the Reclusians' humanity as they're going into battle, which is pretty cool. They have an emotional support mortal, which I think is really fun. Although it is kind of the worst bring your kid to work day, because they're going into like some of the most dangerous situations, you know what I mean? Because they are they have like centuries worth of lifetimes of combat experience. So they're some of the best fighters the Stormcast have to offer. So I don't know how these little mortals survive that as they're running around the battlefield. Just like kind of like waving their like incense and like, you know, telling the Stormcast who they are and what they've done to try to like center humanity. The other thing is like all of the little parchments they have that they carry is kind of like the Stormcast's resume. So it's a detailing of like all of the great things they've done in the past lives, and I think that helps anchor them and remind them of like who they are and what they've done. They have not confirmed, and they use a lot of vague language when they talk about what happens to a Stormcast Eternal after he gets reforged too many times. And they did say that these guys only have a few reforgings left, which is kind of spooky. I don't know what happens after. So we don't know if they become, if they just fade away. Maybe they're like, when they die, their soul goes up and they just can't recapture them. The soul goes away, or maybe the soul can't fit back into armor. We haven't seen that yet, and they haven't told us concretely exactly what that means. I personally would love to see a Stormcast Dreadnought where they take this lightning energy of a soul and put it into like a construct that isn't armor, and they've completely lost all their humanity. They're not like a person anymore. They're not a person in armor. They're just like a lightning construct that's out there, you know, almost like a Necron Scorpec destroyer, where you just kind of like drop them on the battlefield and let them go. You know what I mean? So I'm curious to see how that story is going to progress. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that goes. But that is basically the unit that they've showed us so far from the Ruination Chamber, and I like them. I think they're really cool. They're gonna kind of be a pain to paint. I'm a little sad they have the same shield as the Vindictors and the new Liberators. I know they have a different icon. They have a skull icon instead of a Sigmarite icon. But I think like a round Annihilator shield would have been a little more fitting for that. So I'm kind of sad they went with like that basic shield. But other than that, I think they look pretty dope. So talking about the article that they released talking about battle traits and battle formations, which they released on April 12th. It is currently April 18th. So again, we're kind of just, I'm filling in the gaps to sort of get this one out, because I know James and I talked about it at length, a crazy amount when it first came out, and it's kind of just been sitting in our back. We've been waiting to grab an hour to record, and it just hasn't come. And now like they're releasing more things. Like they just released the combat. They're releasing magic on Friday. So we want to talk about those things a little bit more. Not to say this Battle Formations was bare bones, but there's not, they confirmed some things. We talked about some Stormcast stuff, and other than that, it is what it is. You know what I mean? So moving on to the article, just some definitions. So battle traits are your army-wide rules. So these are the rules that your whole army is going to get. You have battle formations, which is basically your new sub-faction. And they confirmed each army gets 4 battle formation, which is pretty cool, because 40k, they only got 1. And they've had 1 this entire time. Like if they haven't got a codex yet since the launch of 10th edition, they've had 1 like sub-faction way to play. That's it. That was your rules. So it's pretty nice that Age of Sigmar is getting 4. And I think that's kind of necessary, because Age of Sigmar is the builds you can do in Sigmar, I think, is very different. You know what I mean? Like, you can have, most factions have ways you can bring all monsters, all infantry, all cavalry. You know what I mean? So if we had one rule for each, or one sub faction, I guess, for each faction, it'd feel really bad. IMO. So I'm glad they're giving us 4. They also confirmed that each faction is going to get a faction pack, which is a deck of cards released alongside the new edition, and it contains 4 battle formations. So so they're gonna do what they did in 40k, right, where they release a deck of cards, and it's not this one, but it's similar, right? They're gonna release a 40k, or 40k got something where they released like the war scrolls, more or less. And I don't know if they had like the faction rules in that or not. But this one probably will. This one will have your tarot cards that are your new war scrolls, as well as like your faction rules. I would highly recommend not getting them. So the Stormcast and the Skaven are going to get some, and then they're immediately going to get their book. So, like, if you intend on playing Stormcast or intend on playing Skaven primarily, do not get them. Wait. Just wait. You're going to... On it, like, unless you're so fast at building and painting, or you want to play with the models that you've already had when it comes to Stormcast or in Skaven, you're not going to be able to get many games in before, like, the actual book drops. So if you want to save yourself a little bit of money, I would recommend not getting those and waiting. We also don't have a timeline for when other factions are getting, like, their faction pack. You know what I mean? So you'd hate to buy this and then, 2 months down the line, you have to buy it again. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much these are going to be. I think the Leviathan cards are like $35, which is another reason I think they're going to the packs. But because then they can charge you for the book and the packs. So we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna wait. I collect Cruel Boys, I collect Ironjaws, I collect Stormcast, I collect Seraphon. So I'm not gonna go out and buy 4 faction packs immediately. You know what I mean? I'm gonna wait. Like, I'm gonna wait until I start, like, actually kind of maybe getting some games in, seeing what faction I want to lean into before I get them. So just a fair warning, that does happen pretty consistently in this hobby with Games Workshop. Is they'll sell you stuff and then sell you more stuff that you, like, need soon. So ye be warned. So that brings us to the Stormcast Eternal rules, which there's been a lot of, like, discourse online about them. People are kind of like, oh, we only get 4 and there's not that many. Or, like, 2 of them are kind of combined. One is a once per game. So we really have, like, 2. You know what I mean? After everything's kind of said and done. I'm just going to pull off a slide and show you what we currently have for Stormcast Eternals. So we have 8, like, this is in 3rd edition with my Stormcast Eternals book. We have 8 subfactions, 4 battle traits, 4 command traits, 9 artifacts of power, 6 spell lores, 3 prayers, 6 mount traits, 5 holy commands, and 3 endless spells. That's too much. Like, that's way too much. Of all of this, the only thing that really matters is Thunderbolt Volley. So Thunderbolt Volley, call for aid from the holy commands. You may have used Celestial Blades for a spell. There was really only one mount trait that everyone took, the Scintillating Tail or whatever it's called. You had the Comet, the Everblaze Comet. And then, like, your subfaction kind of didn't matter. Everyone just kind of took Hammers of Sigmar because it's like a 6-up ward. If you're standing on objective is fine. You know what I mean? You don't have to change the way that you play. You just play the game and you get the bonus for already doing the thing that you want to do, which is stand on the circles. And Translocation as a prayer. I don't even know. I've played Stormcast since they came out, like, this edition. I don't know the other 2 prayers we can do, because the only one that matters is Translocation. So I'm super happy to see this cut down a bit. I'm glad I don't have to memorize this for myself. I'm also super glad that I don't have to memorize this for every other faction. You know what I mean? We don't know what it's gonna what they're gonna give us when they start giving us books, but I don't want to learn. Like, if you want to be competitive in the game, right, you have to understand at least what the top, like, let's say 8 armies do, like, on an intimate level, right? And that is so much bookwork of understanding of, like, how this game functions, which is kind of crazy, like, to think about all the knowledge that you have to remember, and then to get into all of, like, each one has, like, 8 subfaction. and they drastically change how that faction plays. Stormcast Eternals, not so much. You know what I mean? But like the Signs of the Storm ability that we currently have and still have, definitely changes how you play, whether you're that or Stormkeep. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, I would James, like we've had this conversation multiple times. James agrees with me. We'd much rather have less rules that are more impactful than more rules that you're never going to take. You know what I mean? You're just like making basically the incorrect choice if you take these. You're taking a less efficient option. And that's really only kind of reserved for narrative games. And even in narrative games, things start to get wacky after things start getting built up. So I'd rather have less options, you know, less options that make more sense. So let's talk about the specific battle traits that they showed us. So the first one is their finest hour, which I think is a super fun and flavorful thing that they're kind of giving us, considering that like each unit of ours is kind of like heroes in their own right. You know what I mean? They're like heroes that are brought from all over the world or all over the mortal realms, gathered in and eternally fighting in one direction. So it does make sense that their finest hour is carried over from a hero ability to now our faction specifically. They also confirmed heroic abilities are going away. So I don't care. Other people might care. People with big heroes probably care. You know what I mean? But for me, it's one less thing to think about when I'm trying to take my turn. So their finest hour, it's in the hero phase, and it's once per turn. And it's important that it's in your hero phase. So you cannot use this defensively. The declare step is you pick a Stormcast Eternal unit that does not use its ability this battle and uses ability. So you get to pick each unit once. The effect is for the rest of the turn, add 1 to wound rolls for that unit's combat attacks and add 1 to save rolls for that unit. So it's only rest of the turn, does not last a round, which is very important because if you like finest out or there's no using on your enemy's turn for that +1 to save defensive buff, it's kind of I know I'm putting myself into a dangerous situation and I would like +1 to save but when they eventually hit me back, I would like to I'd like to weather that storm. Other than that, that's pretty much it. So it's really going to be a +1 to wound bonus. The big takeaway is that it's in the hero phase, which means unless there's a specific rule which says you can use this ability or you can use abilities who on units that are in reserve, you will only be able to put these guys on guys that are already on the battlefield. Which is important when we talk about our Signs of the Storm. Signs of the Storm comes in the movement phase, which means you can't put these guys on a unit that just showed up for Signs of the Storm. So it's not going to come in and be like, you know, Annihilators usually wound on 2s anyway, so it doesn't matter for them. But maybe let's say like Stormdrake Guard, they come in 9 inches away. You would put them on this, like this on them, and then they charge in. You can't do that. This is for like they come in, they charge. Your next turn is kind of a like, all right, boys, we got to fight and we're going out. You know what I mean? So let's have this little like finest hour, kind of like almost like a last stand, get +1 to save, +1 to wound ability. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's definitely like good. It's cool that we can use it on all our units. And I don't hate that we can't put it on our guys who show up from movement, but it does feel like a little bit of a like miss. That would be really nice for us to just have a casual +1 to wound, +1 to save the time we show up in from Signs of the Storm. But I know they plan that specifically so we can't do that for balance sake. So I'll take it. So in the deployment phase, the other one that we have is the Celestial Realm. And that is basically kind of what we have now. If there's more Stormcast Eternal or more friendly Stormcast Eternal units on the battlefield than there are in reserve, you can pick a friendly Stormcast Eternal unit that has not been deployed and put it in reserve. So you set up that unit in the Celestial Realm. It has now been deployed. So pretty standard for what we have already. You'll put these guys in a regiment. You say, all right, my regiment's a 1-drop. You'll put one of them on the board. You'll put one of them in reserve. One of them on the board, one in reserve. Or drop a whole regiment on the board and then a whole regiment in reserve. And as long as it's 1-to-1, there's at least one unit on the board for each unit that you put in reserve. You're good to go. Very easy. And that pairs with our movement ability, and this is Signs of the Storm, which is pretty familiar to what we have now. You pick a friendly Stormcast Eternals unit that is in the Celestial Realm, which is our special reserve pocket. And then we set that unit up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from all enemies. And that's what we have right now. So not a whole lot has changed on that front. And then our fourth and final battle trait that they've given us is Heaven Sent, which is a once per battle movement phase ability. And it is a command, which means it costs 1 command point. This is basically Call for Aid. This is like the only heroic, or this is the only holy command that's carrying over from the from 3rd edition. So what we do is we pick a friendly, non-unique Stormcast Eternal Infantry or Cavalry unit that started in the battle with 2 or more models and that has been destroyed to be the target. So already we have some changes from Call for Aid. Call for Aid, you have to pick a Redeemer unit, which is currently like your basic troop screen units. Here you can pick an infantry or a cavalry unit. So you can pick some of your heavy hitter infantry units like your Annihilators, or you can pick some cavalry units like your Dracolines and potentially Stormdrake Guard. They are cavalry. They're just cavalry on dragons. So we'll see if they let that one fly. The other thing is you don't have to spend this immediately after it's destroyed, which is important because I've messed up multiple times when I'm playing my Stormcast where I don't save a command point for Call for Aid, and then they kill one of my Redeemer units, and then I can't get those guys back because you have to spend it immediately after they die. Or I save a command point, and they don't end up killing my little guys. It was also felt kind of bad because like I would send them out. I would like put them in the worst possible situation as long as they were being a speed bump because I want them to die. Like I need to guarantee that they die because I've saved a command point for this exact moment when they die to bring them back. And that kind of felt bad because it was like you were always choosing what between if the enemy has enough damage to kill my unit, I'm saving it until I'm saving the command point. I'm not putting any defensive buffs on these guys. I'm saving the command point and I'm going to Call for Aid them back. Or if there was a chance that they could live, you tried to put defensive benefits on them like all defense and stuff like that and hope that they lived. And then sometimes you miscalculated and you were wrong and you spent your command point on the wrong thing. And now you got to hope that your other Redeemer units that you've brought die in a similar fashion so you can bring them back. I've had multiple games where I just don't get it because either some guys went and stood on a point their entire game and never died. And the ones that did, I miscalculated. So I like this a lot because it lets you choose from the pool of dead units, which is, it's simpler. It's less not gotcha, but it's less like you messed up the minor, so now you pay. You know what I mean? And again, that's in theme with the new edition. So that's kind of like the whole discussion on how you pick the target. So the effect is that you set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from the target unit, rounding up more than 9 inches away from all enemies. So some important changes here is there's no stipulation. They want you to use it on a reinforced unit. That's the whole goal. Because if you use it on a reinforced unit, then you get half that unit back. You know what I mean? Or you get the non-reinforced unit back. So the way they worded that is a good way to get around that asterisk. So I'm really happy to see that. The other thing is we don't have to bring them wholly within 12 of a hero. We can just put them back on the battlefield, which it's not the biggest issue in the world, but sometimes if those guys were kind of like protecting your castle and your castle was getting crashed, and your heroes were in that castle, it might be a little bit difficult to put them wholly within 12 and outside of the 9 of the enemy. You know what I mean? Not that anybody would play this way, but your opponent could definitely make it so that that wasn't possible. You know what I mean? So it's just a nice thing that it's like you can drop them anywhere on the battlefield and put them like on objective. It opens up a lot of paths for utility, which I really, really appreciate. Instead of like, I would always just use it to get another screen back to like send in a second wave of screens to protect my castle. And this opens up utility to use on different things. I also love that you don't have to, like, it's not like you have to designate a unit. You know what I mean? So, like, if it works on Stormdrake Guard, I have 4 Stormdrake Guard. They die, I bring 2 back. You know what I mean? But what if I really, really need something to show up over there? You know what I mean? And, like, the game-winning play is I can pick one of these guys for my Heaven Sent target that is just a random unit of dead guys. It might even be, like, a 3-man unit of Annihilators. You know what I mean? And maybe they're not, like, double, or maybe they're not reinforced, but I really need someone on that point over there. So I'll use it on them and I'll get 2 back because half rounding up and then put them over there. And it's like, I love it when there's utility stuff that you can use that's not like, you could potentially use it in a situation where it's not the most optimal thing to do overall, right? But it's the thing that you need right now to win you the game. And I like that we have that as a tool kind of in our pocket to lean on. So battle formations. So they showed us 2 battle formations. And the first one that we get is Thunderhead Host. And let me just say that I'm happy with how, like, brevity these are. I like how short these are. I know people were like, oh, if we get 4 of them and they're this short, like, that's not really, like, I don't know. Doesn't really like give you that much. You know what I mean? Which I don't disagree with. I don't think it gives you a whole lot, but I do like what we got right here. They've shown us 2, and we know we're getting 2 more. So, the first one is the Thunderhead Host, which gives us the passive of Synchronized Strikes. Oh, before I get too far away from it, sorry. Heaven Sent is a movement phase ability. It doesn't show it has any keywords. I assume it'll have a move keyword. So, like, no one is assuming that if you drop people from Heaven Sent or Signs of the Storm, because they're both in the movement phase, that you can move after you land. I don't think they're planning to do that again. You know what I mean? We've already fixed that issue across multiple armies for the whole edition. Like, I don't think they're gonna just bake it into our core battle traits for 4th. You know what I mean? I will give them that much credit. I don't think they're gonna make that so that we can move after without baking it into the core rules that says you can only use 1 movement phase ability at a time, or 1 movement phase ability per unit. So, like, these would be those units' movement phase abilities. I think it's pretty cut and dry. Okay, finally. Okay, sorry. Thunderhead Host. This gives us the passive of Synchronized Strikes. So it says, effect: add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly warrior chamber units while they are wholly within 12 inches of any friendly non-hero Stormcast Eternals units that do not have the warrior chamber keyword. So, a lot of the war scrolls that they've shown us have been warrior chamber. They've also kind of mixed around the warrior chambers. I know Vindictors were not originally warrior chamber. So I'm curious to see, because there's a makeup chart in the Stormcast Eternal Battletome, which shows all the different chambers and what units belong in each chamber. So I wonder if they're going to rewrite that, because that's interesting. You know what I mean? Like, if they're changing a little bit of lore so that Vindictors and Liberators are now in the same chamber. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so this is basically I have a bunch of different units. I want to put them all on the board, and I want them all to work together. And only the warrior chamber people will get the +1 to hit. So probably your melee boys, and any like the guys that trigger it are non-hero, so you can't just stick a random hero there and get it. That do non-hero Stormcast Eternal units that do not have the warrior chamber keyword. So the way this reads to me is you have units like Long Strikes that have the Vanguard chamber. I assume Vigilors will also be Vanguard. We already have the Ruination chamber, which is probably going to be some hitty boys. And then we have the Extremist chamber, which is going to be like your heavy shock strike cavalry. So also Sacrosanct chamber, rest in Peperinis. I don't know if they're going to be included in this whole mess or if they're going to get their own little index. They said that they're going to get their index, right? So like that would mean that they're not included in the Stormcast. Like you play basically Sacrosanct as like its own little faction, at least until they get rid of them. I think that's how that's going to work. I don't think they're going to be inside Stormcast as a whole. I don't know though. I have no idea. But yeah, I'm not super impressed by the Thunderhead host. I feel like it's going to be a lot more like it's going to be a lot more of a pain to get, and I don't think warrior chamber units are really your hard hitters, unless like paladins and like your damage guys are really not warrior chamber. I don't think, right? That's going to be your extremists or like your paladins or something like that. So like I think it's going to be really difficult to get that off. It's also like it's only on warrior chamber units. So really like it's going to be dependent on like how good are the warrior chamber units. If Dracolines are warrior chamber, they said that because Dracothian Guard are extremists. They said Stormgate Guard, Dracothian Guard, and I believe like some of the other big dragons are extremist chambers. So yeah, I'm not super impressed with this one. This is the one that I'm like, unless I was building a very heavy dump Vigilors behind Vindictor's army, which sounds fun, but you're not going to have any damage. Like those two units don't do damage. You know what I mean? Even with the Vindictors having like +1 to hit all the time, they're not going to do damage. So I don't know. A little bit of a miss. The next one is a lot more exciting because this one is the Lightning Echelon. So it's a once per turn ability. It goes off in any combat phase, which is important because it's your opponent's turn as well as yours. So you declare, pick a friendly extremist chamber unit that is charged this turn. Effect, roll a dice. On a 3-up, that unit has the strike first effect for the rest of the turn. So you're going to be using this on your big shock cavalry, like your Stormdrake Guard, your Dracothian Guard. And this is pretty flexible because you can countercharge. So then you've charged in the turn. And then in the combat phase, you roll your dice, and ideally you get a 3-up, and then you have the strike first effect on their turn, you know? So that's pretty strong, especially if you, if they like creep up on you, you countercharge them, and then you get this, like, that's going to be pretty nuts. That makes countercharge much better for these guys because then you can put a strike first effect on it, which they've talked about how that works in the comment section, which we'll be talking about next podcast. But it works kind of like pretty familiarly with what we already know and love. So strike first effect is very strong, and on a 3-up, it's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like you're just not looking for 2s and 1s. But yeah, so that is what they've given us as far as battle traits and battle formations. I'm less excited about battle formations. I'm more happy that they're simple and I don't have to remember, you know what I mean, like all of the specific details for the little ones. I'm glad they give us like one solid rule, and I'm glad this is going to be on a card that like I can have, and like my opponent will just show me what it does, and I'll be like, okay, I understand that. I'm more excited that like each we know that each faction is going to get 4 of them. I'm also pretty happy with the Stormcast ones. The Finest Hour is less good than I initially thought, but it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, it's adding 1 to wound, and we're probably going to be wounding on 3s, so it's going to be wounding on 2s, all out attack. So you're like almost every unit in our army has the ability to go to 2s and 2s, which is pretty awesome. It's going to be super nice for like fighting against equal level. So our chaff versus their chaff, our cavalry versus their cavalry. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of increases our output, which is good because that's, I wouldn't say we're lacking output, but we definitely don't have as much obvious output, unless you're talking about Dracothian Guard. You know what I mean? So, I'm really happy that they've given us that. I'm also happy that it doesn't affect shooting attacks, because that'd be really boring if you could find a Tower and like wound on 2s at range. Like that would be dumb. I'm glad they've said combat attacks. It feels like the way that they've worded things, they've kind of shored up any loopholes that someone would try to abuse, especially with the Heaven Sent ability. It obviously it's going to depend on infantry, cavalry, whatever. But from what I've seen, I'm pretty happy with that. So a little bit of, like, talking about the Warrior Chamber, that's pretty in line with what I was assuming. They're going to put Warrior Chamber on things, and then that's how they're going to denote, or they're going to put chambers on things, and that's how they're going to denote what can interact with what. They did show us the Vindictor War Scroll, which is, I think I own 40 Vindictors. I've just kind of collected them over a third because I love their model. They're the first Stormcast unit that I actually like the look of. I didn't like the look of the first and second wave of like the fat cast. I really like these guys looking more like humans. You know what I mean? Just like superhumans, not like just like emotionless World of Warcraft suits of armor. You know what I mean? These guys look and feel human, which I like. I also like the change of the shield. I know they're kind of like copying and pasting it to like every single Stormcast new unit, but I do like the look of the shield. I also like the spears. So they confirmed that the Vindictors are Warrior Chamber. They also say Standard Bearer 1 of 5, which makes me assume that they're 5-man units, and they can probably be reinforced to 10, which is fine. I was kind of hoping one of our basic troop unit would get to be 10, like bog standard, like the Iron Jaws Ard Boys. That's kind of what I wanted, because I want something. I want a good anvil. We don't really have a good anvil right now. I kind of wanted Vindictors to be that anvil. And they are a little bit. You know what I mean? The hold the shield wall combat phase ability that they have, and the anti-charge that they have on their war scroll, that definitely helps. But like that's damage back, and that's not the issue that we have. The issue that we have is 20 wounds on a 3-up save. That's it. That is that's the biggest defensive profile that we've seen so far. You know what I mean? So like that's the thing that I wanted. I wanted something that would be a giant wall that I could throw buffs on, and that it can chill. Granted, you can get this to, you know, a 1-up save, basically, with all out defense and their finest hour, but that's only on your turn, and you're probably not taking the big hit in your turn. You're probably taking like the hit that you chose to take. So, I mean, it could be good if you think you're going to get countercharged, but then you have to kind of like think ahead a little bit more. You have to think, oh, I'm in a position where they could countercharge me. So in my hero phase, I'm going to put that on this unit, just in case they they countercharge me. So, which they'd have to they'd have to charge into a potential strike first, -2 rend, lots of attacks. You know what I mean? So I don't know if they're actually going to countercharge you. So I don't know how effective that strategy would be. But all of the war scrolls that we've seen for Stormcast so far have been Warrior Chamber, right? The yeah, I believe that Stormstrike Chariot was also Warrior Chamber. So I want to see another chamber. I know they told us what the Extremist Chamber was. We know about the Reclusians, so we know they exist in the Ruination Chamber. But I definitely want to know more about the chambers. I'm excited to see how that all shakes out. So, but yeah, thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Next episode, we'll definitely have James back, and we can talk about all of the fun combat stuff. We're gonna have an episode talking about combat. We have an episode talking about magic. You know what I mean? We want to keep these under 1 hour. That way, it's easier to view, and we want to cover the topics, explain. We don't want to just sit there and read the article to you. We kind of want to assume that you either read the article or you know the gist of what's going on, and we want to kind of talk about the intricacies of the specifics, because I know those are the things that we want to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, going over the stuff is cool, but we want to talk about the intricacies. Like, I want to talk about, like, you know, all of the intricacies of the not finest, or their finest hour. You know what I mean? I want to tell you, like, it'll happen in the hero phase, which means you can't do it on Signs of the Storm, which means you can't do it on a target that just should back up from Heaven Sent. You know what I mean? Like, talk about those kind of little things that we enjoy talking about. So thanks again. I'm sorry it was a solo cast. We probably won't have a whole lot of those, but hopefully you got something from it. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot. See ya.